I'm Edward October, and I'm here at the October Pod Ranch in the Great Smoky Mountains. Almost every night here, there's a ghost story party around the campfire. In my family, we believe that scary stories are best told around a roaring fire with a bottle of wine. That's why bold individualists everywhere choose October Pod for their retro horror thrills. Our stories are so good because they're told with such care, understated, moody, and above all, chilling. Why don't you join us? For retro horror of impeccable taste, choose October Pod. Find us on YouTube or at octoberpodvhs.com. October Pod, retro horror for bold individualists.
This episode is brought to you by the Slash and Cast Podcast Network. Learn more at slashandcast.net.
Hello and welcome back to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. I want to acknowledge that this past Friday, May 14th, marked 6 years since Amanda's tragic incident. I am asking you all once again to call and email the District Attorney, Brett Smith, along with anyone you choose to in the list of contacts that I have in the show notes and on my social media pages. Hopefully, with your help, we can get Amanda's case reopened and reinvestigated by unbiased new investigators. Kimberly and her husband Justin have been fighting for 6 years for Amanda's case to be looked at from a different perspective, but everyone they've talked to come up with excuses not to, basically wanting the family to move on and accept the ruling of suicide. These people will die on that hill unless we push back and let them know that we won't stand for it. I can only imagine that it's been a frustrating 6 years for Amanda's family and friends. I hope that with this series, with more people learning about Amanda's case and the suspicious circumstances surrounding it, that something will get done. Kimberly, her husband, Amanda's sons, all of her family and friends deserve to know that everything that could have possibly been done has been. And like I've said, as of right now, that hasn't happened, and it's unjust. In today's episode, I want to tell you what led up to the Sherman Police Department's decision to finally recreate the crime scene in 2018. I'll let you hear multiple audio clips from Grayson County's Forensic Conference and the Sherman Police Department's Citizen Police Academy. I'll discuss meetings that Kimberly had with Assistant DA Britton Brooks, another with Assistant Chief of Police Stephen Dean, and a meeting with Sheriff Tom Watt and Deputy Tony Benny. There are many things in this episode that make you go, So let's get into it. In the last episode, you heard a phone conversation between Kimberly and Officer Nick Emmons. The conversation ended with Kimberly requesting to see the scene recreation in person. She was sure if she could just see it in person, it would make sense, and she could have certain questions of how, what, and when answered. The conversation ended with Emmons affirming that he would try to get approval from his supervisor to share the scene recreation with Kimberly and Justin. Remember, they recreated the scene, but without Kimberly or Justin present. Kimberly was sent copies of the pictures and videos of the recreation through the Freedom of Information Act. However, what she saw only raised more questions than answers. To some, it may seem as though Kimberly will never be satisfied or be content with any so-called expert's opinion, or that she will not ever accept the fact that Amanda may have committed suicide, if that happens to be the case. But that is far from the truth. For the first 2 days of Amanda being on life support, Kimberly had thought that it was certainly possible. During every single meeting, Justin and Kimberly never denied the fact that Amanda was capable of ending her life. They knew she struggled with mental health issues. On the other hand, Kimberly and Justin were taking into consideration the patterns of Amanda's wounds that were not feasible in the manner in which Brian demonstrated. How there were witness testimonies of Brian making a death threat by choking that very day, Amanda's plans to leave, and her personal items that were packed in her bags. Also, the intentional, false information Detective Jones felt he needed to speak and write that supports his suicide theory. Amanda's family and friends are adamant that the investigation was biased and unfair because of all of these undisputed facts. To help her understand how law enforcement and the justice system work locally, Kimberly attended a Grayson County Forensic Conference and the Sherman Police Department Citizens Police Academy. The knowledge that she gained completely contradicts how Amanda's investigation, or lack thereof, was handled from day one. For example, how can an autopsy be performed and a death certificate be complete within 24 hours without any information provided to the medical examiner except female, possible suicide by hanging? How important are autopsies in Grayson County, Texas? Here are some very specific thoughts on that from Texas Ranger Oliver and Assistant DA Carrie Ashmore from the forensic conference Kimberly attended at Grayson County College.
Speaking of that, Ranger, do you recommend having an investigator at the autopsy?
Absolutely, every single time. There's so much information that you gather from autopsies.
One of the things an investigator in autopsy can do, if you've gotten information either from other officers of crime scene or from medical staff that are usually dealing with life-saving techniques and they're not so interested in forensic type stuff, is you can ask questions of the ME right there. Oh, you got this wound? Wait a minute, the ER doc thought this. What about that? Why is that not accurate? Why might that be confused? So that's very important, and I encourage y'all, when you're investigating a murder, have one of your investigative team at that autopsy.
I'll take it one step further, Mr. Ashmore. If you're working a death investigation and you not clearly know how that person died, somebody better be at the autopsy.
Now, let's take a small step back to information about autopsies. The definition of hanging as a cause of death is when a cord is attached at one end to a fixed point and the other end is around the neck as a noose or wrapped several times and full or partial body weight restricts blood flow. Dr. Urban was convinced of suicide by hanging with such limited and inadequate information. Details about the electrical cord being 5 feet, according to Detective Jones's report, with Amanda sitting on her knees, which was mistaken as a prayer position according to Brian Espana, the sadistic man she lived with. Detective Jones's report indicates that he spoke at length with Dr. Urban on May 21st, 2015 at 2:45. Yet, Kimberly has evidence that no conversation had taken place before May 22nd, 2015. So, going off of what Texas Ranger Oliver said in the conference, why didn't Detective Jones attend the autopsy, or even call the medical examiner beforehand? Just something to think about. Kimberly and Justin continue to be professional and grateful for every official who has taken the time to hear their concerns, review the case file, and give their opinions. Amanda's family has devoted 6 years trying to understand why her death was dealt with as a suicide from the very beginning, and why homicide was never even a possibility on the table. Every meeting or report circles around, quote, she had a history. She had a mental health history. But guess what? Brian Espana had an incredibly violent history. Here is a clip of a meeting that you'll hear in full in Part 6. This is newly appointed Sherman Police Chief Zachary Flores' statements concerning Amanda's mental health history.
And you haven't, if you've read the history, and I'm not sure how much history you know of it. I mean, there's statements of domestic abuse from this guy already. He's already been arrested for it against her. He's had history before of domestic abuse against other females. He had a warrant against him already. I'd already met with a police officer and let him know the domestic violence going on there. And that's why your detective was sent there. That's why he was sent
Officer
there.
Boyle knew us.
Officer Boyle knew us. You know, we worked out together before. He knew the history already. He requested him to see him because of that. There are statements made from Amanda to other people that made statements to us and other statements to other people before we knew what had happened. That man,
3 days later.
3 days later, that he holds me down and chokes me out often. He already told me that if I wasn't gone by X time,
7 o'clock.
he was going to choke me to death.
5:20, she was on the phone with her friend for a ride.
At 5:20.
5:20.
Making plans to leave. A bag packed downstairs. Clothes packed upstairs. What does your history and your knowledge know of that? Does that tell you someone's going to commit suicide or they're trying to leave?
So at 5:20, she talks to somebody, and at 6 o'clock, she decides to hang herself?
Well, and at the same time...
Again, you cannot... I'm asking you right now to look at it without the ME's ruling, because we know that she didn't get the information to make
A fair
ruling. She was given information to rule a suicide. So, I mean, with that information, I mean, how do you look at it?
But also to add into that, I mean,
Sure.
we had also responded for her mental health multiple times. See what I'm saying? Oh, we got more than once.
Yeah. But
And I know that she
wasn't suicidal.
Had she not made threats of it before?
She had taken a bunch of pills, and Brian told us that she was trying to kill herself. She did not tell me that. That was Brian's words.
Not hers.
I mean, an overdose
And she asked for help.
and suicide are two different
But
things.
that's what I'm saying, though. That is part of the picture.
And we
But
completely
it's not fair.
We completely agree that, is it possible?
Absolutely.
We agree. It is possible.
They are convinced that Amanda's mental health struggles was the basis for the case being exceptionally determined as a suicide by hanging on August 5th, 2015. The official date of the case approved and closed would not be until May 24th, 2016. And I will get into that more later. After Amanda's autopsy results and 3 meetings with Detective Jeff Jones, Kimberly and Justin met with the Assistant District Attorney, Britton Brooks, in June of 2015. They discussed their concerns about the lack of investigation and the possibility of homicide. Britton Brooks agreed that the circumstances surrounding her death were suspicious, especially with Brian's violent history of domestic violence. He said that he would meet with District Attorney Joe Brown about Amanda's case and see what they could do to help. Justin received a follow-up phone call from Britton Brooks and was informed that the District Attorney Joe Brown did not feel it was necessary for him to get involved in the police department's business. Basically, Assistant DA Brooks relayed this message from Joe Brown. Quote, "They give us our caseload and we have to trust their investigations." Joe Brown also mentioned that he was not going to rock the boat or step on anyone's toes. Well, Ranger Oliver and Assistant DA Carrie Ashmore seemed to think the opposite, that everyone should be working together. This was an example presented about a different domestic violence homicide.
And he will not confess to us. But because we did things right, we slowed down, and we processed the scene, and we were Mr. Ashmore woke up and came out early that morning to look at the scene, to look at that car, to give us his advice on make sure, because you know what, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of us, every one of us in here know how to arrest people. Sometimes what we forget is that once we arrest them, everything now starts a time clock, right? A clock starts. And we make darn sure you're on the same page with the DA's office. Because they will tell you things, hey, ladies, gentlemen, guys, if you do this, we're not going to be able to do this. So why don't we try, what do you think about trying to get this information, this evidence first, right? Got to have it. He was woke up, he came out, and he helped us.
Normally I just do what Brad tells me to do, but okay. That's not came out.
So, Rob, you remember what the doctor told you was a contact point, right? And that's what screwed everything up, because that's what I said during the interview. And he knew that it wasn't a contact point. But when we go to the medical examiner, they tell us the distance. So for demonstrative purposes only, we show that. Exactly what the medical examiner said in her report. Okay? But you got to understand how to document it and why it's important. But because, like I said, because we did our job, because Sherman Police Department detectives did their job correctly, we took our time. We conferred with the DA's office. We brainstormed, how's the best way to do this, how's the best way to do that. Jimmy Ray Wallace on November the 7th of 2016, Grayson County jury was found guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison. Okay? But it all started when the 911 call came, or when dispatchers called us. We had a murder, and we started right then. From the very first Sherman officer on the scene, to the very first detective on the scene, to the very first time we contacted Mr. Ashmore, all of us working together and making sure that we have, in a very professional manner, we have a work product that we were able to successfully prosecute Wallace. See, we can't do it by ourselves. Mr. Ashmore can't do it by himself. It takes all of us, every single one of us. If you want to get justice out here for Maria, then sure. The only way that we get that is to do that, is for us to work together.
According to Brooks, he and District Attorney Joe Brown consulted with Texas Ranger Brad Oliver. He claimed that Oliver took a courtesy look at the case file and agreed with the suicide ruling, saying there was no need for any additional investigations because nothing suggested homicide. That opinion seems to go against how Ranger Oliver and Ashmore handled a different domestic violence death investigation. Ranger Oliver and Assistant DA Carrie Ashmore had even more to say about a death investigation.
Here's something that you got to remember. Don't you try to have the evidence fit your theory. You make sure that evidence directs you in your investigation. That's a big problem somebody has. They got this theory, and now they're trying to finagle the evidence to match your theory. And that's not what we do.
Just as an
In September of 2015, Kimberly submitted a Freedom of Information Act request for Amanda's case file per Detective Jones's suggestion. She received all the records that she asked for from the Sherman Police Department. These copies of the records did not deem Amanda's case closed, and the supervisor had not signed off on the reports. Up until this point, the family only knew limited information about the case. What they knew so far was what Brian and the detective told them, what Amanda's friends and co-workers told them about all of the abuse and death threats, and what Amanda's injuries were. That is all Kimberly and Justin had been working with up until October 2015. Just reading the first few pages of Detective Jones's report revealed that he had falsified statements to fit his theory of Amanda's cause of death, which was pointed out in that clip of Ranger Oliver and Carrie Ashmore that it's clearly wrong and unethical to spin a theory to fit your narrative. In September 2015, Kimberly and her husband met with Assistant Chief of Police Stephen Dean to discuss their concerns and the many discrepancies. When they told him that they had concerns about the inaccurate information in Detective Jones's report, the first thing out of Stephen Dean's mouth was, quote, "Y'all shouldn't have received a copy of the file yet because all the T's weren't crossed and I's weren't dotted," end quote. Meaning the copy Kimberly and her husband obtained had not been reviewed and approved by Detective Jones's supervisor, Jason Jeffcoat. Kimberly asked about Brian taking off and how he had not been seen by anyone since May 17, 2015. Assistant Chief Dean replied that he was not at all suspicious of that. He said that's typical behavior, going on to say that that is how they are. If they know, they may bring attention to themselves. Perhaps he was afraid that he would get in trouble. They being people in the country illegally. However, Brian had a violent criminal record for at least 10 years, with multiple arrests on outstanding warrants. Brian Espana has had police reports filed on him, and he has been arrested for DUIs, family violence, escaping custody, and numerous traffic violations. So why would he pick this time to run? Why now? That doesn't seem questionable to anyone in law enforcement, just everyone else. That's interesting. During this meeting, Kimberly and Justin were again reminded of Amanda's mental health history, as if Amanda's own family and close friends don't know her better than they do. Like her mental health hadn't been brought up every time they spoke to someone about her case. The outcome of this meeting would not be known until 7 months later. Kimberly tried over and over to schedule a follow-up meeting, but every single one of her phone calls and emails went ignored. Assistant Chief Stephen Dean's report started with Amanda's prior history, not Brian's, as usual. His report stated Amanda's history of suffering with mental health issues and substance abuse. He wrote that Brian's timeline confirms his whereabouts and steps that he took to save her life. Witness statements from Mrs. Thompson and David Adams corroborate Brian's account. This next sentence really lit a fire under my butt. It states, quote, "Confusion for the family came from uninvolved and misinformed people in the days following the incident." End quote. So you are actually saying witnesses to the abuse that she suffered and the murderous threats they knew about through Amanda herself, that these people are misinformed and uninvolved? The people who talked to Amanda all the time, who are family members and friends, they are uninvolved and misinformed? You really thought that made sense when you wrote it, sir? Did you believe that utterly absurd statement when you decided to write it? Are the closest people to you uninvolved and misinformed about you and your life? The ones that know you best? That's something. I am sincerely in amazement at the audacity and, quite frankly, some of the stuff these declared authorities, experts, and professionals say out loud and put in their reports are embarrassing. Yikes. Here is the priceless opinion from Mr. Stephen Dean. He said Amanda Pierce was reportedly trying to leave the relationship but felt nowhere to go and expressed some level of desperation and that she believed she had to be out of the house that evening. Stephen Dean actually said that he agreed with suicide by hanging. His conclusion? Because she was so desperate to leave the relationship, she hung herself less than 2 hours after making arrangements to leave. I'm sorry, what? So let me repeat that. Quote, she was so desperate to leave the relationship, she hung herself less than 2 hours after making arrangements to leave. Let that sink in and marinate over this commercial break. So, does it make sense to any of you listening that Amanda made plans to leave the morning of the 15th, was going to call Kimberly back to talk to her son, but she was so desperate to, quote, leave the relationship that she hung herself less than 2 hours after making arrangements to leave? How does this make any sense? Is it possible? I suppose anything is, but in this situation and everything that we know, does anyone believe that she would decide to hang herself instead of just leaving as she had planned? I have kept putting myself in her shoes and walking through this scenario in my mind over and over again. Personally, if I packed all of my belongings, possibly drank to go to sleep so I would hopefully not have to deal with the person who beats the shit out of me almost every day, I would imagine I would be so ready for morning to come to leave behind that apartment and that awful man that hanging myself would not even be a thought in my mind. I would be thinking about how happy I would finally be and so excited to go see my kids. I just do not believe she had the thought of taking her own life. That is my personal opinion, and I think these statements made are complete nonsense garbage to fit a theory and a narrative. This is the hill that they choose to die on? What is the reason for it? So, moving on. In February of 2016, Kimberly sent an email to Dr. Jill Urban, the medical examiner, asking to have a face-to-face meeting with her and Supervisor Jeffrey Barnard. Kimberly's request for the meeting was declined. In April of 2016, Kimberly made another request through the Freedom of Information Act for Amanda's case file, which was denied. Why? Because the case was still considered open. In April of 2016, she was sitting on pins and needles as she waited with bated breath to see the potential revisions, additional investigation supporting the suicide ruling, and Assistant Chief Dean's report after their meeting the previous October. Why was the case still open? What exactly was being investigated? Kimberly had not heard anything else from Detective Jones since she had last emailed him at the very beginning of September. The emails are as follows. Quote, Detective Jones, I wanted to follow up from our last meeting in May concerning my sister Amanda's death. You stated that you would question Brian Espana when he is picked up on his outstanding warrant for a previous domestic violence charge about the night Amanda was taken to the hospital. I am anxious to know his accounts of that night and see if there was any further suspicion from your department after a formal questioning. I know your records don't cross over to the Grayson County court records concerning prior arrests and warrants. When you have a moment to check on that, please let me know what you find out. Will the Grayson County Sheriff's Office know to contact you for questioning, or have they already? I know your opinion about this case and what you have decided, but also know that we have our opinions as well, and know we are not in 100% in agreement with that decision. This is based on the law enforcement not even making a consideration to look at this event as possibly more than a suicide. There's too many unanswered questions where we stand, and we look forward to hearing Brian's account away from the immediate scene of this incident. You made me and Justin a promise to at least question him during his detainment and arrest for the warrant. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter, Kimberly Mullens. And that was on September 2nd, 2015, at 11:30 that morning. Detective Jones wrote back a one-sentence reply. He said that he would contact her when it was complete, and that was on September 8th. So Kimberly wrote back immediately saying, quote, Detective Jones, please clarify when what is complete, the arrest on his outstanding warrant or questioning regarding my sister Amanda's death. We would like to be notified when he is arrested and on any further updates concerning Brian Espana. With his violent and criminal history, we do not want this to happen to anyone else. Thank you. End quote. And she hadn't heard from Detective Jones since September 8th, 2015. Amanda's death was exceptionally ruled a suicide in August of 2015, and they had done nothing since, with the exception of the meetings Kimberly and Justin requested, which were fruitless. There was nothing being done. Meetings and phone calls were being denied, but Amanda's case still sat open, accumulating dust while her family kept fighting, begging everyone in and around the police department to at least make an effort to see things from their perspective, to have even a shred of genuine empathy, and to make them grasp the reality of there being plenty of rock-solid facts that open the door to the colossal likelihood that Amanda could have been murdered by Brian, and that he possibly staged the suicide. In June of 2016, Kimberly filed for Amanda's case file again through the Freedom of Information Act, and found the case had been officially closed and approved May 24th, 2016. She was able to obtain all the records. It had strangely been open all this time, Even after being ruled a suicide, there was no additional work on the case except Assistant Chief Dean's report, and that was over 1 year since the incident that led to her death. Someone who worked within law enforcement casually mentioned to Kimberly that Detective Jones took an early retirement in May of 2016 and was taking another law enforcement job in a nearby town in North Texas. Was it a coincidence that Amanda's case closed the year after she passed away, and almost immediately Detective Jones retired? It was claimed that his leave seemed sudden as well. Coincidence? Maybe. On September 20th, 2016, Kimberly and Justin met with the newly elected Grayson County Sheriff Tom Watt and his deputy Tony Benny. They were hoping the sheriff's office would take another look at Amanda's case. Kimberly provided a copy of Amanda's case file to the sheriff's office, and she was promised a follow-up 1 to 2 weeks later. Well, almost 3 months later in December 2016, they finally had a follow-up meeting with Deputy Benny. On Kimberly's blog, thepainofInjustice.wordpress.com, there is a post titled Renewed Hope for Justice, where she wrote about this meeting. She said when they entered the conference room in the sheriff's office, the chief deputy had a pad with written notes. She already had a feeling that this meeting would not be in their favor, and unfortunately, she was right. Deputy Benny started telling Kimberly and Justin that there had to be enough evidence to prosecute a case, and even if Brian walked into his door, confessed to killing Amanda, and turned himself in, there still would be problems with prosecuting him because the evidence does not support murder. Kimberly wasn't even sure if what Deputy Benny said was even true at this point. She wrote down some points that he made to her and Justin about why it wouldn't be possible to get a conviction. Number 1, the issues that Kimberly had raised about Amanda's blood alcohol level and being conscious or even being able to hang herself at a .384 BAC. Deputy Benny said because of her history of alcoholism, that level may not affect her like it does a normal person. He said that he had arrested someone with a higher BAC that was driving and they were completely able to function. He said that point would not hold up in court. Kimberly's now wondering, if Amanda was 120 to 130 pounds, could that level at least affect fine motor skills? Just because she was drunk, does that make it automatically plausible that she committed suicide? What would be the normal alcohol level for her? There's no baseline. Kimberly even told me, as she had also written in her blog, that she's seen Amanda drink a 6-pack of beer and she could not even hold her cigarette. Number 2, Deputy Benny said Brian had a history of choking her with his bare hands. Why would he now use a cord? Kimberly makes a great point in her blog saying, quote, "No one can vouch for every choking incident she suffered through. He kept her isolated from everyone. How can it be determined that an abusive psychopath will only choke a certain way? He said he would kill her. Maybe the hand-choking method wasn't successful in the past, assuming that is the only way he ever choked her. So why not do it with something more forceful to make sure he carried through with his promise?" So I want to give my thoughts about this. Brian continuously told Amanda that he would kill her and get away with it. Is it possible that this was all premeditated? That he could have been thinking if the day did come that he would indeed murder her, what he would do and how he would do it? What if this was his plan? What if he did stage the whole thing? Because there's no doubt that it does look staged to me and many others who have examined these pictures again and again. If Brian would have known that Amanda told Amber and Dustin about the death threat that day, and also knew that Miss Ada Thompson overheard it, I tend to think that he may have fled sooner than he did. Now in number 3, Kimberly says that Deputy Benny asked, quote, if Brian intended on killing Amanda, why would he attempt CPR for 15 to 20 minutes before calling 911? Why would he try to save her life if he intended on taking it? Brian's efforts kept Amanda alive to make it to the hospital. End quote. Kimberly wrote in her blog, quote, well, she was brain dead and her heart had stopped beating. She was only alive because we had her placed on a ventilator. The question here is, did he really do CPR? The witness, who told me he helped take her down, but then told the police he did not, and Brian had different accounts of what happened in the moments around this event. Why didn't he call 911 first, instead of letting her lie there not breathing? Why were he and David downstairs when responding officers arrived and not up there with her helping? Everything that happened in those moments is what Brian said happened. It takes 5 minutes for anoxic brain death. The times just do not add up. Kimberly continues to say, I'm sure with some research, I could come up with men or women who try or even kill their partners and try and stage it as an accident or suicide. Kimberly continues to write that she began asking Deputy Benny about the marks and bruises on her neck and how it did not add up to what Brian and the police said happened. He said the autopsy supports Brian and Sherman Police Department's ruling. Kimberly reminded Deputy Benny that the autopsy wasn't fair because Dr. Jill Urban didn't have any evidence, reports, etc., just Amanda's body. The deputy started to take up for Dr. Urban, saying that he knows Dr. Urban and she does a great job. Kimberly then asked about the threat of murder, Amanda having her things packed, inconsistent timelines, lies in the detective's reports, Brian leaving town, and Deputy Benny said, quote, I don't have answers for your questions. There was nothing else Kimberly felt that she could say to convince him, and there was nothing Deputy Benny could say to convince her either. After Kimberly looked over the entire file, there was nothing besides the autopsy in that file that could lead him to believe that Brian could have taken her life. Kimberly says that she left there brokenhearted, but not hopeless. She called Deputy Benny after leaving the meeting and asked him what he would do differently if this was his wife, daughter, or sister. He simply said, the evidence doesn't support homicide. It's been ruled a suicide. Deputy Benny changed the subject, reminding Kimberly that she has leaned on the Lord so much during all of this and needs to keep trusting in Him. I am going to address comments like this later. Kimberly had now gone through every single person she possibly could in Grayson County. Nobody would help. She started to realize even more clearly now that Sherman Police Department, including everyone at the DA's office and the Sheriff's Department, was on Brian's side. After the meeting with Deputy Tony Benny, Kimberly sent Sheriff Watt a text message asking him if he agreed with the deputy and the Sherman Police Department. Kimberly needed to know if he personally thought that Amanda's injuries were the result of sitting on her knees and that none of the circumstances around her death was indicative of possible homicide. She wanted to know his personal response to their questions. Kimberly received a phone call from Sheriff Watt, and he suggested that they meet with the newly appointed Chief of Police, Zachary Flores. Maybe he could look at the case with fresh eyes. Kimberly requested a meeting with Chief Flores, December 2016 and February 2017. Finally, he agreed to meet with Kimberly and Justin on March 1st, 2017. He ended the meeting with his promise to review Amanda's case with fresh eyes and get back with her in 1 to 2 weeks. Fast forward to June 2017, not one word from Sherman Police Department. Kimberly sent a certified letter to Chief Flores outlining detailed concerns and photos of Amanda's neck injuries, with a request to follow up on his look into the case. On August 15, 2017, Justin and Kimberly met with Chief Flores and Assistant Chief Jeffcoat. So now we are leading up to why the Sherman Police Department offered to do the crime scene recreation for Kimberly and Justin. Before I go, I need to get a few thoughts out, and I promise it won't take long. You know, the officers and the detectives, among others, have gaslit this family time and time again. It is my belief that not only do they not care about Amanda and her family, but other victims' families. Take, for instance, the late Katie Palmer and injured widower John Palmer. The way they tend to handle things in Grayson County will be talked about at some point, since I keep getting information sent to me about Grayson County law enforcement and others who work alongside them. Not only from people who live there and witness it, but also those who have experienced it themselves. You can also go back and listen to the episode about aforementioned Katie Palmer, who was murdered in Grayson County. The man who caused her death, Corey Foster, got away with it and still walks around freely without a care in this world every day. A lot of cops, detectives, district attorneys, and others say that they have compassion and that we understand, and if it were one of our family members, we'd feel the same way. Just keep praying and trusting in the Lord. And these are the same empty phrases that they use on people day in and day out. I've seen this and heard it over and over, and in this case, it's been the same way. The way I see it, those words mean absolutely nothing, and it's disingenuous sympathy. Now that I was able to release those thoughts, we will wrap up Part 5 right here. In Part 6 of this series, you will get to hear the complete audio of the meeting with newly appointed Chief of Police Zachary Flores and Assistant Chief of Police Jeffcoat. You will hear what they had to say about Jeff Jones's investigation, what the protocol on domestic violence cases are based on state and federal laws, how outstanding warrants should be handled, as well as how autopsies should be conducted. That meeting is so important to this story and will be an episode unto itself due to the meeting being an hour. It is essential to the story, and it's so interesting to listen to for sure. Stay tuned because you do not want to miss a single detail of this series. Until next time, stay safe and take care. And from me and the Mullens, we love you.